Hey everyone. I guess it's 4 o'clock, a little after. Thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate seeing your faces here. Lucky us, we have the opportunity tonight to ask Dominic anything. Dominic is going to sit in this chair. You know me, I'm Bethany Lactarine. This is the Little Theater. I've written things to say because I'm not used to doing this and I forget things. So I'm going to read a little bit. Like I said, today we're here with Dominic DFacio, our 2022 Small Stages Artist in Residency. This is his AMA portion of the residency program where I and you and us, curious thinkers, people can ask Dom questions about his work, about his life, how he got here, his experiences growing up in rural Minnesota. This is a particularly important AMA, I feel, and that it's with Dom's generosity and willingness to put himself on the spot like this, it's a chance for us to dispel some of the myths circulating around drag and the LGBT community, things that we've been hearing. We're going to talk about that. I want to take a second to introduce our panelists, Dom, and if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Joe Rand. I actually work for the University of Minnesota. I work for the Minnesota 4-H program. I'm the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Director across the state.
And I'm going to invite Tammy Nick up to the stage too to introduce yourself. You can come, yeah. It's okay. And if you could introduce yourselves.
I am Tammy Knick. I grew up in the Wilmer area, went to Wilmer High School, and moved back here recently with my husband Doug. And I'm a school social worker, very passionate about children's mental health, of course, and a big supporter of LGBTQ community. And I'm just here to listen and learn and input whenever I can.
And I'm Doug Knick, and I echo all those same things.
To get started with, I'm not used to doing this. A lot of us aren't used to doing this, but I think it's a good idea that we establish some ground rules. And we're going to have Joe help us do that.
Sure. Is it this right here? Yeah.
Is that the same text edit?
No.
Oh, never mind.
No, it's just my slides. How do I present? Do we do that? There we go. So I actually present a lot, mostly to school districts around the state. I actually worked in Becker for the last 9 years too, but have been around in different parts of the state and rural communities because working with and supporting rural LGBTQ plus youth is really important to me because I didn't have that support when I was growing up. So this is where we start, but if you have other ideas of ground rules that we need to share with each other and ask of each other, we'll absolutely honor those as well. But first, just that the work of equity and diversity, which is really what we're doing here, is about creating community, and that involves building trust through careful listening, respectful disagreement, and taking risks. Next, that we want to create safe spaces, and I think especially here for LGBTQ plus people and young people. Pay attention to how much space you're taking up. Q&As with Dom. So we want to make sure that we have ample time for that, and I'll try and check myself as well. But just acknowledge that. Respect confidentiality, so pay attention to what is yours to share and what isn't. When I'm with young people, I say what's said here stays here and what's learned here can leave here. So take the idea, the thing that you learned, that's what you can take out into the world. We're all doing the best we can. We're going to screw up all the time. I have kids that I've known before and after they've transitioned, and learning new pronouns sometimes is difficult. And that's okay as long as you're trying to do better and fix it. Growth and learning can be uncomfortable, so you need to practice self-awareness if this gets too heavy for you, too emotional, etc., and you need to take a step out. I would encourage you to do that. It's not a quick fix. We continue to learn and change and grow as humans over time, and that doesn't happen quickly. And finally, we're not here to debate the right or wrongness of LGBTQ plus people or others that go beyond those letters there. Are there things that aren't here that you think are important for us to acknowledge now before we dive in today?
So I can come by and give you the mic. Any ground rules you want to add to the list?
Okay, well, thank you. And if something comes up, do just raise your hand and we'll get a mic over to you. We thought it would be really important to start out with just sort of a base level so that everybody is starting from the same place. Sex and gender, they're two things that we conflate a lot. The best analogy I can give you is that most people have social media or they've seen a gender reveal, party, video, etc., something. What that actually is a sex reveal party because it's based on an ultrasound and it's based on a picture and what people can see. So sex is the parts, gender is something internal. It's that internal sense of self. And everyone has gender, not just LGBTQ plus people. Everybody has a gender. It's how you feel and it's how you, that gender expression is how you show yourself, express yourself to the world. So those two things are not the same. We often talk about sex assigned at birth because in the United States, sex is legalized. A child is born, there's a birth certificate, we have to write male, female, intersex, or another sex. You have to check a box. The nurse or the parents do that. They look at the baby, the parts that are on the outside, and then they check the box that most closely aligns with. What's problematic about that is that you can't see any of the internal, and sometimes the external and the internal parts don't match. And so about 6% of the population is born intersex, and that means that they have ambiguous genitalia or a combination of both male and female parts and male and female chromosomes. 6% of the population is the same amount of people in the United States that have red hair. So it's more common than you think. And that's just the number that's actually reported because there's a lot of stigma around on a birth certificate checking intersex. And then besides that, we have sexual orientation, which is about the physical and emotional attraction. And then we talked a little bit about gender expression, how we put ourselves out there in the world. Do we want to watch the video? Do we have time for that? Or would you rather just move along? Okay. So let's talk about the letters, and I'll run down these quick because, again, I don't want to take up too much space, but we want to make sure that we do have a place that we're working from. And maybe you're an expert and you know more than me, or maybe you identify with one of these letters that I don't, and you know more about that. I can only tell you about the G because that's my experience in the world, but I can give you the basic definition of the other letters. So LGBTQIA, sometimes you see 2S LGBTQIA, sometimes there's a plus, sometimes there isn't. There are a variety of combinations of the letters that change over time, depending on the research and who's using them, when and where. The letters are great to identify a marginalized population of people that have been historically excluded and et cetera, but they're problematic because they're combining people's gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation all together, and that's why we have all kinds of confusion about sex and gender. And what it means to be a gay person is not the same thing as what it means to be a trans person or a queer person or a lesbian. But they're all of these unique experiences are lumped together in a word so that we can talk about the community. You might also hear, and we'll talk about it in a second, the word queer. And that's another umbrella term we use for the community. And again, lumps everybody together, and again, can be problematic. So real quick, lesbian is about sexuality. That's a person who identifies as female is attracted to another person who identifies as female. Gay is a person who identifies as male attracted to another person who identifies as male. It's also used as an umbrella term, or has been, for the entire community. Bisexual, again, about sexuality, is a person who is attracted to the binary sexes, so either or, okay? The T is for trans or transgender, and that's again about gender, what's internal. And like I said before, I'm not trans, and so I don't know what that experience is like in the world. But a person who is trans is born with, for instance, male genitalia, but their gender, what they feel inside, doesn't align with those parts. And so they use their gender expression to be who they really are in the world. And that may be expressing themselves as female. I also just like to pause here and make sure that folks know transgendered is not a word that you use or should use. And once upon a time, the term transsexual was used. That's also not a term that is used any longer. Queer questioning, that's the Q. Again, young people have really, I'm sure your GSA kids at school talk about being queer. Mm-hmm. They have reclaimed that. That's a term that's empowering for them. Questioning, people are trying things on and trying to figure out who they are in the world. And that's what questioning is about, just trying to figure out who I am. Intersex we talked about, and then the last is ally, agender, or asexual. I keep the ally in because I think it's really important that we have allies. Some folks will take that out because allies aren't actually part of the community. Agender, people who don't feel a specific gender, or they might feel multiple genders, things that because gender is socially constructed. Like, we created that. And so people may or may not feel like that's a box that they fit in. And then asexual, same thing, may not have a romantic attraction at all to anybody. You see the term there, cisgender, and that's a term that you probably will hear. If you haven't, you'll hear it more and more. A person who is cisgender is a person whose parts match who they are on the outside, match their gender expression. So I was born male, I have a beard and look male, I'm cisgender. So that's who I am. So that's what cisgender means. And then real quick, trans identities I think are really important for us to at least talk through quickly, even though we should spend way more time. You have some resources that will be helpful to you. Non-binary, gender fluid, or genderqueer. That's a term that's used by people who experience their gender and or gender expression falling outside of male or female. So if you hear non-binary, again, binary refers to male and female. There are folks who don't feel like they fit in those boxes. And historically, across the world, for centuries, civilizations have acknowledged multiple gender identities. Two-spirit is a term that's used by some indigenous people. And that marks a return to tradition, actually. That definition or those gender identities were actually stripped from Native peoples during colonization, and they were forced into male and female roles. A trans man, again, we talked about this a little bit, a person who was assigned female at birth that identifies as a male, and likewise, a trans woman is a person who was assigned male at birth who identifies as female. So that's my long list of definitions, and I'm going to stop taking up space. But I think we can take a minute there for questions, if there are questions.
Anyone have questions about what we've just learned? Well, I have a question for Dom. I mean, knowing that Dom is bringing a drag show to town, I am very curious about how that happened, how you identify, and the relationship between your growing up as, I want to say, a queer person in rural Minnesota, and how that translated to how you got here today. I know.
Well, that's a great question, Bethany. Well, my name is DFacio. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. I identify as gender nonconforming. The gender binary generally confuses me, and actually it's more of a rejection of the status quo. I'm not a part of your institutions, and I never will be. I never want to be. So that's my my rage fist as growing up as a weirdo in rural Minnesota. So the Catwalk Party started in 2018 as part of Springboard for the Arts, my employer, nonprofit arts organization in Fergus Falls and St. Paul. The Year of Play was microfunding to inspire play within the community, and which was $500. And I had already been doing community events for a solid decade by that point. So there was a wink and a nudge of, hey, Dom, you do all these cool things. Why don't you do a drag show? And I was like, if there's money on the table, I'm going to snatch it and I'm going to make something cool happen. So I did. It took place at this quaint little venue that doesn't exist currently in Fergus Falls called The Spot. It was about a 70 to 80 person venue. I built a 12-foot, I didn't build it, I can't take credit for that. I designed it, my brother built it. It's a 12-foot T-shaped catwalk that was built with my own money and time and energy. Because when I have a vision, I don't cut corners. People were suggesting to take wooden pallets and just put a plank of wood on top of it, and that could be the catwalk. It didn't align with my vision, so I rejected that and did my own thing. That catwalk, fun fact, is going to be here for the show on the 10th, so maybe it's a little baby star of the show. Oh, but I had background in makeup design and photography and just I had producer qualities as a kid growing up. My dad told me when I was a kid, you better be really rich when you grow up because you have the most expensive hobbies. I was the 6-7-year-old that was like, Dad, I need turntables and a mixer, but it needs to be this because of the sound quality. And he's just like, you're a kid, go to school, like, go play on the park. But I never did get those turntables. But so my career as a creative placemaker or event producer started with the Fergus Falls Zombie Crawl. I started that in 2009. I believe I was 19 at the time, maybe 20. And Fargo started their Zombie Crawl the year before, and I was too young to go. And so I was hanging out with my friends, and I was like, why don't we make our own? And they were like, yeah, that's cool. Anyway, back to doing what we're doing, and I was like, no, I'm serious, like, I'm gonna do this. And so I did the legwork of figuring out how that works, hired a terrible band at the time. Oh, this is being recorded, I should be nice. The band doesn't exist anymore. It was a very fun garage band that did 3 songs twice. And actually, that event christened the backspace of the spot, like the music venue. The stage, the last screw went into the stage hours before the horde of zombies showed up. It was very raw, which is great because it helps me with my my DIY aesthetic and my DIY attitude. So anyway, started that. That's I live for Halloween. I love Halloween. So the only thing better than one Halloween is 2 Halloweens. So I started, the Zombie Crawl is typically the last Saturday of September or first Saturday of October. I've been doing that since 2009. Every year, the pandemic threw a wrench in the works, so I shifted it to a trunk or treat so that could be socially distanced but still fill that gap for the kids in the community that love Halloween. Oftentimes, Bethany and I were discussing, like, oftentimes I'll think about, like, what did I want or need when I was a kid or a teenager? And what I wanted was what I'm doing. And so that's why I started the Zombie Crawl. I wanted more Halloween. Why isn't there more Halloween? No one's doing it. I'm doing it. So with the success of the Zombie Crawl, which is a free community event where I invite the entire community or anyone to put on their best zombie garb, meet at this one location that was chosen specifically because it looks very post-apocalyptic. So it's this really nice backdrop. Again, I'm very much an artist of like, here's the vision. And so we meet there, and then we would walk up and down downtown Fergus Falls, ending at the spot where I would hire a live band and DJs. There'd be food specials, drink specials, and it was basically a pre-Halloween party. After 10 years of the Zombie Crawl, I shifted it into the Monster Mash, so the Fergus Falls Monster Mash, which took place in 2019. The pandemic stepped in to say no for the following years, but that was the same event basically, but it was more than just zombies. I figured after a decade of just zombies, like, I'm bored with it. Like, let's do witches and vampires or goblins or Finding Nemo for all I care. Like, just have fun with it. And so did that. And then in 2018, I started Dance Macabre, which was a monthly goth dance night. It was a reason to dance the night away in a room full of fog, wearing your favorite black lipstick and platform boots and learn some new music. And I was the resident DJ. And then I would find other regional or local DJs to play spooky music alongside me. So then there was a couple different flavors. My flavor was very much like death rock and dark wave and minimal synthesizer music. And then my friend, that was an often occurrence, he would play more industrial and club hits from like the 90s. And then in 2018, I also started the Catwalk Party, and so that... sorry, I kind of got lost in there, but that was my journey as to where I came from and where I ended up. And so drag is important to me because I love the transformation with makeup and hair. Again, I'm a big fan of the technical side of things. I love to just like learn from queens or kings, like in product application, tools that are used, how they're used, and like it just fascinates me. And it's like a really nerdy thing, but it gives me comfort and it's fun. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's a king or a queen?
Yeah, so a king or a queen being the femme presenting and king being the masculine presenting. So one performer that I work with, I work with a lovely variety of amazing performers. Someone can be cisgendered female and be a king, but still ride the fence of androgyny. So they might have like a cat winged eyeliner, but then also a painted on beard. And so it's less about what it's supposed to be, because drag is really breaking rules or finding rules and then breaking them, of the social gender construct. And another performer I've worked with, they recently moved to Vegas to pursue their entertainment career, which I'm really excited to hear more about, but they're very androgynous and they use they them pronouns as well, so they're well, yeah, I'm not sure. I won't respond. I won't go on to that because I don't have that answer. But
yeah, I'm wondering too. We've talked about this, but I am very curious about what you know about the history of drag. Because is it the same then as it is now? How did we get to this point?
Sure. Well, I'm not a historian, so I'll do my best. But drag was like Shakespearean times. Women weren't allowed to perform in theater, and so men would have to dress as females, and so that's where drag really comes from. Their dresses would drag across the floor, and that's what I've been told is why drag is called drag. When I was a kid, I thought it was like an acronym for like dressed something for the R as a girl. I don't know where I got that, but yeah.
Do you think drag is an art, to be a drag performer?
Yeah. Anyone in any person, any identity can perform in drag. RuPaul's Drag Race, of course, is like a huge jumping off point or introduction, especially for kids or anyone, not just kids. It's like anyone that doesn't know about it, that's like a good mainstream intro. And in a recent season, there was a performer named Maddie Morphosis, who is a cisgendered heterosexual male and on the biggest drag platform on the planet, and they didn't get eliminated the first episode. So I feel like if RuPaul is kind of like setting a standard to a degree, I think that's great, and it really just shows that anyone of any identity can perform in drag.
So bringing a drag show to New London, why do you think it's important for that to happen here, or anywhere for that matter?
Well, I'll jump back to when it started in Fergus Falls. The Catwalk Party was the first drag show ever in Fergus Falls, or potentially rural Minnesota. My friends, they were more of acquaintances at the time, but they would do drag on Halloween, like during a safe time. It'd be public, like at a bar. When Lexi D, for example, she was the hostess of the Halloween event that was hosted out of the bar, and people loved that she would be in drag. She'd have wig changes, costume changes, she'd meet and greet everyone. Like, you felt really special every time Lexi was just even like winked at you. You were like, oh, that's me. But she would only do that for Halloween because it was a safe time. And so I had a chat with her, and I was like, Jeff, do you want to do more drag? And he's like, well, yeah, sure, I would do more drag. I was like, great, we're going to do that. so we did, because I was the weirdo in high school wearing obscene amounts of makeup and fishnets and silly hair, and it was fun. And I think flying your freak flag is a fun, liberating thing to do. Even if you look at photographs 10 years later and you're like, ooh, that eyeliner looks so smudgy. But we all had a journey, we all had to start somewhere.
And that's kind of the thing, right? We all have to have a spot, and that's what we're doing that for here, is to make a space where we can fly our freak flag. I wanted to ask Tammy and Joe, and I'm forgetting your name, Doug, working with students, what has your experience been working with kids who are curious, kids who are questioning, and what that brings up, especially in a school system, especially in the community as it is now? Either one of you can take that.
I'll just take that out. Well, as a school social worker, I had a lot of students coming into my office. Initially, they may not come out to me, but as they learn that my office is a safe space, I have posters all around identifying myself as an ally, and so eventually they do come out and let me know, and sometimes they're just looking for support, sometimes their families are not supportive of them and they haven't come out to their families yet. But I just think it's really important that we allow a place for kids to belong and to be who they want to be. I don't know if any of you know this or not, but suicide is the second leading cause of death for kids ages 10 to 24, and multiply that by 4 for students who identify as LGBTQIA. Did I get them all? And so I just have a very special place in my heart that we need to come alongside these kids and support them in whatever they want. If it's up on the stage, if it's coming out to their friends, I just think it's really important for them and their mental health, and we owe it to them.
I would begin with what is the purpose of education, to frame this question in that context. And the purpose of education is to challenge what one believes as the truth. I love that you were, challenging from the very beginning, because that is the purpose of education, is to challenge what we identify as those hegemonic constructs that said this is how you have to live. And if we can't support every student in that journey, we're making a mockery of the purpose of education.
I'll also say that why New London? I feel like why not everywhere? And really, this current AMA that you're all at right now, or the shows on September 10th, it's really about getting the notification out there to people that are either out or not out, or people that just feel differently, whatever that may be, that there's people out there that care and accept them for who they are. It's about acceptance, not tolerance. And so the offering is more important than the thing itself.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that from a college student perspective on that level?
Yes, I actually don't work with college students because I work with the 4-H program. So I am with high school and middle school and younger. And then I was a GSA advisor in Becker for 9 years. The advice I would give right now is that folks need to pay attention to what school boards are doing, because school boards are taking away symbols of safe spaces and pride in schools, which is actually not legal, and that continues to be challenged, but school boards continue to feel empowered to do that, and that creates a really harmful environment for young people, because that's the place that they spend the most of their time. So we have to do what we can to support the teachers and the people who work with queer young people, and also make sure our voices are heard to those people in positions of power, so they understand that there are huge repercussions for the decisions that they make.
Thanks, you guys. I want to just make sure everyone knows that this is being recorded, as you can see. 1017 Media was gracious enough to come out here last minute. We're going to post this. And so for those who are unaware of the drag show who might see this video, Dom, could you tell us about the teen show we've got coming up? 13 to 17 years, for 13 to 17-year-olds with parents and guardians. What's going to happen at that show?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the performers, and with the happenings happening in the community and surrounding areas, we've shifted it to be it'll be from 3 to 4 on Saturday the 10th, and it will start with a brief intro from myself introducing the performers. They'll do a group number as a whole, and then sit down and have a Q&A with the attendees, and then it'll close with a second group number. And for that group, not the group number, but for the teen show, as a courtesy, I'd like to put an offer out there to any teen between 13 and 17 years old, if they're interested in performing or want to learn more about it, to attend that. But if they, whatever teen was really like, I want to do that, that's awesome, and like they're gonna do it, let me know, like sooner than later, so then I can make some space in the set list and make sure that you can have some time in your spotlight. I see a hand raised over here.
Would you turn away anybody who was 18 or 19 that was interested in drag?
I don't think so. I mean, no, the theater one? No, I mean, for the 18, 19-year-olds, I would recommend the evening show, because that's going to be more...
They're interested in learning more about it, too. So
oh, okay.
For them to come to that earlier show.
Yeah, totally. Come to the earlier show. Ask the questions. It's only an hour long, and so I know that with AMAs or Q&As, it can take up a lot of time, and wow, do the performers I work with, they have a lot to say. So we'll fill that hour very quickly, and so yeah, if these people or individuals you're speaking of, they're not planning on performing, but they just want to learn about how to do that, then yeah, totally, come to that.
Dom, have you ever performed drag?
I'm performing in drag right now, sweetie. RuPaul says it best, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Which I believe there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, we all choose what to put on our person and how to present ourselves to the world, and what makes us feel good and what doesn't make us feel good, and laying down those boundaries for ourselves and others. I don't consider myself a performer. Some would disagree, because I do full regalia of big hair and makeup and clothing, etc. For the show, for Pride this last June, I did an impromptu number at the very end. It will not happen again. But it was raising money for a local LGBTQIA2+ youth group. And these kids, I've hung out with them. I've learned from them. They're so much more woke, or woke is the wrong word, that's too touchy, but they're so much more aware of the world than I was when I was their age. So I love to hear from them. They're very passionate teenagers, and they feel very strongly about a number of things. And so knowing that this money was going to go towards that organization, I was like, screw it. I'm hit and play and jumping out. Even the performers didn't know. It was not planned. There was no set list. I was just like, hey, I'm going to do this right now. And they're like, what? And I'm already running out to go and do my thing. So people said it was fun. People said I did great, but as an artist, I'm my own worst critic. But I had a can of hairspray, because I had my big hair up, and I was just spraying people's heads with hairspray and rustling it up and collecting tips. And then I took all those tips and donated it immediately, directly to the youth organization, which, by the way, is called Saga Youth, the Sexual and Gender Alliance. I couldn't get business cards in time to bring them here, but the person that runs that, Christine Franson, she's an amazing human being, and she's created such a wonderful safe space, and that's very new. That started in 2021. Sorry, 2021, 2 years ago.
Okay, early on I said anyone can ask a question, and I think, Joe, you said, or maybe you didn't, I can't remember, but we're going to mess up when we ask these questions. We might say something that's offensive or hurtful or not quite right, but I'm going to ask some questions. Do you have to be gay to be in the drag show?
No. No, actually in the catwalk party, 3 of the, I don't know their identities, but they're cisgendered women that typically play masculine roles or somewhere in between masc and feminine. And they're mothers, they have children, they have businesses, they're community members. One of them very explicitly states that they don't like kids, but that's, and her best friend is one of the performers that has a daughter, and so they have like these jokes back and forth. But no, I don't think, they might fall underneath somewhere under the umbrella, but 2 of them are, all 3 of those women that I'm speaking of, they're married to men. I'll put it that way.
I'm going to open the floor. Yeah, Danny.
In the last month that you've been staying here, have you personally been confronted with any of the negativity that is circling around town about the shows?
Just in reading the paper and having a brief interaction with an individual that decided to ask a silly question at my meet and greet, and that silly question was something along the lines of like, why do you present yourself to the world the way you do? And my response was something like, I wake up in the morning. Any other questions? Because I didn't have time, and I wasn't going to give that the time and energy of going back and forth of such a boring and mundane question. But no, otherwise, in general, everyone I've met, other than that one day, has been supportive, friendly, kind. Someone bought my lunch today, and they were like, who are you? What are you doing? I'm like, I'm an artist. You might have heard some hubbub about a drag show happening here. That's me bringing that. And they were like, oh, cool, whatever. And then I went to pay for my lunch, and it was taken care of. So I was just like, wow, okay. But the theater's board has been incredibly supportive, and just ready for any of the needs that I have. And I've been annoying Bethany left and right of like, hey, can I plug this in? Can I plug that in? Everyone's been very helpful and very friendly. Yeah.
Tyler.
Hi, I'm a high school teacher. Well, sort of. Anyway, what advice would you give to people that aren't a parent or a sibling or a direct relative, but have some of those spaces, and someone maybe has come out to you or talked to you? What's the role of me as a person in that person's life? Just be there, or anything else?
Well, I'd say just being supportive and accepting. Again, the key word is acceptance, not tolerance. Tolerance might be a step along the journey to acceptance, which is acceptable, but acceptance is the end goal, in my opinion. So I think being someone that's a listening ear, non-judgmental, and it'd be also really cool to have resources available where if a kid is like, I'm not sure about XYZ, then you can say, hey, I got these pamphlets. That's always a good starting space. But I'd love to hear from the panel over here too.
As I mentioned before, I have posters hanging on my door in my office, letting kids know that you're an ally. And I think just really providing a listening ear, sometimes that's all they need. And I always want to check for safety too, making sure, are you feeling safe about this, and maybe inquire who else have they told and what was the response. Those are some of the questions that I usually will prompt students to get more information, because I want to really know that they're okay with where they're at. And if they start saying, like, I'm not okay, I'm feeling terrible about this decision, my friends are making fun of me, whatever, then I might go into some deeper questions. And obviously, as a teacher, maybe you don't feel comfortable with that, but please refer them to your school social worker or counselor to assess for feelings of, suicide or depression or those types of things.
I would say in my experience that the individual is very conscious on who they came out to, or the questions they're asking, or what they're sharing. They don't do it just to anyone. And so I agree 100% about listening, but my experience is that they have a reason that they're sharing it with you. And so I will, and students who know me know that I'm always going to follow up with some other questions, not to put them in a difficult position, but to give space for them to get to the heart of why they're sharing that with me in that moment. And it might be because they're not feeling safe. It might be because they need my affirmation. It might be because they know that I'll ask some probing questions for them to make them ponder as they walk away from me.
I would add, if you're ready and comfortable, do some homework and be an advocate. So being an ally takes action, and sometimes that is just showing. I'm wearing my rainbow shirt, I have the sign in my room, but so much happens to those kids every day in school that even just affirming that what has happened to them was damaging, like that's huge. But then helping them figure out, or taking it upon yourself to figure out, how do I correct that injustice that happened to them? I think that does a lot to give kids hope.
I would just follow up and echo that exactly. And I think of, in the almost 30 years that I was in public education, that they knew I would do something about it. And that's why they came to me.
Tom, I'm really curious too. Growing up, could you share with us any extremely positive experiences you might have had coming out as queer, or even negative experiences, and where that led you?
I identify as gender nonconforming and pansexual, and the reason for my choosing of that is because I have no obligation to be the same person tomorrow as I am today. And I hope that makes sense. Like, I've been with my partner, who happens to be female, for over 18 years, or in September it'll be 18 years. And so people, me working within queer culture and doing queer events and stuff, they get kind of confused of like, I thought you were this, I thought you were that. And I was like, enough with the labels. Like, I'm personally exhausted of it. But for like the first catwalk party, it was a groundbreaking event. There was never anything like that to exist in Fergus Falls, and the buzz was real. I made lipstick tickets. It was little tickets with a picture of lipstick on it that had the date, the venue, the suggested donation at the time, and all of that. I had to print 100 of them because I kept running out, and people were panicked, like, I need to be at this show. And I didn't mention that we broke fire code that night. We broke fire code because there was at least 100 people in that venue of 80. People were spilling out in the hallway, and there was people of all diverse backgrounds, specifically politically, especially at that time. And by the end of the night, even people that were very right-leaning, I'll say, were at the front of the catwalk and snapping their fingers and screaming yes to the performers and tipping them. Like, they were having a great time. And it was built in like a way that it was created exclusivity, but a very open exclusivity. So it was like you had to know a person that knew a person to know what the event was and where it was happening. So that helped to like build the buzz of the show. And so anyway, long story short, the following day I had to bring some equipment to one of the performers at his place of work. And I was in the parking lot walking in with a microphone and a cord in one hand, and someone, like some car just like whipped around. It was an empty parking lot, I'll be fair. It was an empty parking lot, but they like whipped their car around like Fast and the Furious or something, I don't know. And they rolled their window down, and they were screaming at the top of their lungs. They're like, Dominic. And I checked it out. And they said, I've lived here in Fergus Falls for over 20 years, and I've never had more fun than what happened last night. When is the next show? And I was like, girl, I'm still hungover. Like, I haven't even thought that far ahead. But so anyway, the catwalk party was really, it's been a base. It's become a staple in Fergus Falls area because it's a welcoming space. Like, people aren't rejected. People aren't judged in that space. people get dressed up in costumes, which, by the way, if you plan on coming to the show on the 10th or either show on the 10th, dress to the nines, why not? I had people turn out in full bodysuit leotard things. Like, I don't even know what they're called, but it was a one-piece spandex that stretched across their entire body with a wig and lipstick. So yeah, I feel like with my work of doing the catwalk parties and just existing in a rural space is kind of giving unspoken permission for people to live their truth. Does that even answer? Did I go all the way off the rails?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, I mean, it feels so good to hear you telling your story and knowing that your shows are truly a beacon in Fergus Falls for people who need a space like that. Gosh, I would like others to ask questions, because at this point I feel like, because Dominic and I have had so many conversations in the last 2 weeks, I feel like I'm repeating myself even if I'm not. Gosh, any other questions from folks? Sure.
When I went through all the classes in English, you know the possessive nouns and all the pronouns and whatnot. And the one thing I just don't get is the they. What is they? My daughter is trying to correct me on it, and Mom, you're not saying the right thing. But I don't know why is one individual called they when it's plural.
Yeah, they can be used singularly as well as in groups. Joe might have some more information on that.
Yeah, actually, they has been used in the singular for hundreds of years. Shakespeare wrote and used they in the singular in his work. And we also do it all the time. So there's a unicorn backpack on the table. They must have left it. And we don't even think about it. But then all of a sudden, when it's about gender identity, it trips us up. So we get in our own way. So it's not correct English that they is always plural.
Right, and I'd say learning is the first step. Like, we all learn from somewhere. And so don't beat yourself up. Like, many people in my life use a variety of pronouns and have a variety of expressions of gender, including transgender. And so I personally get, it bugs me when if someone is a trans woman and they've been known in the community as a man their whole life, and then someone says, "Oh, well, she, oh my God," and they like stop the party to like make a big scene about like, I use the wrong pronoun. It's like, don't do that. If you get corrected, like it's she, then just, oh, I'm so sorry, thank you for correcting me, and then move on. Like, you don't have to like be super embarrassed or like shut down about it. It's just, we're all learning. It's fine. I mean, all we can do is do better next time.
So some individuals may choose to call themselves they?
Yeah. For example, I use he, him, or they, them pronouns.
Okay.
And I choose those pronouns. I feel like I'm not an educator, but I feel like if I'm able to give that offering of like, you can use they, them pronouns with me, then that's an option for people to test themselves and to learn. And so like, it's not, I'm gender nonconforming, so it's just like they fits that, but I also identify as male, so he, him also fits. So I typically like to use they, them pronouns as an offering, so then people can use it as testing grounds to kind of like get used to it. And if they use he, him, they don't have to have that, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm so, and it's like, no, just move on with your life. Like, it's fine. It's not polite to direct more attention to a very public mistake like that. Like, and especially when it was an individual mistake versus the person you're referring to. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I have done that myself, and I really appreciate that advice from you. I will never do that again. And another thing, sometimes I struggle with using the proper name. Kids sometimes want to change their name, and their previous name they call their dead name. Yeah. And if I've known that student for a few years, I mess up sometimes, and they correct me, and apologize, like you said, but I will not make a big deal of it anymore because I feel so guilty when I do it, and I won't anymore make a big deal. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just good not to make a big deal about it. I have a nibbling, which is in the middle between nephew and niece, if that makes sense. Nibbling is the new term that I found, and I think that's adorable. I kept using the wrong thing, and I was saying niblet, and then they were like, no, I'm a nibbling. And I was like, oh, but niblet is cute too. But they have changed, they had their birth name, which is their dead name, and then they've changed their name at least twice in the past handful of months. And so if I use their previous name, they just correct me, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, moving on. And they don't have a big deal with it because they also have trust with me. So yeah, I'm glad that can help to some degree.
The follow through is what's important, right? Like correcting yourself and actually doing better the next time. And so sometimes what I'll tell people is, if you do that, and then later on, once you are not in that scenario, like, think of 3 qualities about that person and use the right name and right pronouns. And like, just do that in your head, just because that helps to retrain your brain then about that person.
My name is Rain. Hi. Do you have any advice for, I work in the field in children's mental health and also in an educational setting, and have come across some parents who really struggle with name change. Because there's a lot of thought put into it when their child was born, and wishing they would just change it to something similar to what their given name is or their dead name is. Do you have any advice or things that might be good to say to parents to help comfort them in those situations? I mean, the parents that I've talked to are very supportive, and that's sometimes the hardest thing for them and I know for myself as a parent as well, I put so much thought into my child's name. I would be totally supportive, but I would have a hard time with the name change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my brother, for example, when he had his name legally changed, his name was very similar. He could easily take a femme name and flip it into a masculine name, so that's what he did. But I can understand that some names, I'm thinking FTM, for example, female to male, as an example, like a very feminine name could be difficult to like shift it and still have that sincerity that the parent had for like naming their child that. And I mean, I don't know, I'm not a trans individual, so I don't know how much I can speak to that, and I can understand that being a challenge. But I mean, at the same time, they had lived their life with that given name for X amount of years until they've decided to change it. So I feel like even living with that name for half their life or a quarter of their life, whatever, is still honoring that. Joe, do you, or either of you?
I was just going to say, within an educational setting, and I've had this occur several times, where there'll be a meeting with a parent or parents coming in or a guardian. I will always ask the student, how do you want me to refer to you in this conversation? And because I don't want to surprise a parent if they're, or if there's angst amongst that name. So they will, I've never had a student yet not be honest and say, I think you better call me this, or no, I want you to do this. And sometimes they will, I'll get the pushback from the parent, but I will be consistent with the child, and the parent may say, but their name is, and well, you deal with that at home. For right now, they've asked to be called this. Now, there's legal issues with name and, that stuff, but the child wants to be called that, I'll call him that.
It's a grieving process for parents. And that's not wrong or bad. It is. You have had all the hopes and dreams for your child, and you envisioned it in a certain way. And now that picture is different. The important thing is, when you're grieving that, to not put that on the kid. And so it's really tough. But coming back to love, like that's where you have to lean into while you're doing that grieving.
I like.
That's totally understandable, and I think that, I was just so happy that the parents are supportive, and that's their biggest, concern is the name, which they can, like you said, it's a grieving process. It's just different.
Yeah, I was going to say the word grieving is such a good way to describe that. It's a personal thing. When one grieves, it's a very, very personal thing. So I really appreciate you saying that, and that it's for them to grieve, not for the child.
I think Danny, you had a question.
I just wanted to say that having gone around town last week distributing flyers for the event and all the positive comments I heard from people, I think this little theater will break fire codes.
We have time for one more question if anyone has one. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of in and out, but I think this hasn't been asked yet. I'm just kind of curious, for the people who are afraid of what's happening and what's going to happen, do you have anything to say to those people to maybe ease their fear or, just kind of soften what they're probably imagining that isn't going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question, because that's a difficult question. I'm really grateful that those people exist, because we share something very common, which is safety of children. And their concern about the safety of children is absolutely valid. However, it being projected at Drag, the theater, myself, that's not acceptable, because that's not what the show isn't that. What they've been spreading on various platforms, where I've never done a teen show, so I'll be just totally honest. I've never done like a youth-centered show. So all the media that you'll find when you search my name on Google is from 18-plus shows. So the content that you see from those 18-plus shows is absolutely not what would be provided for a teenager show. So that alone should help dispel some fears. At the recent show I did in Fergus Falls a couple Saturdays ago, there was a seahorse costume and a shark costume, where, you can imagine what it looked like. It was it was a kid's song at an adult show, and in silly costumes. Like, there's no nudity, there's no pornography, there's no physical contact unless that's determined between the audience member and the performer. But the difference between the teen show is really just the offering of, like, we see you, we accept you, and you're welcome in this space. That's really all it is. That's why it's going to be 2 group numbers, so the kids and whoever decides to come can get a glimpse at what the performers serve in terms of looks and aesthetic, and then also just make some space for them to take questions. And versus the catwalk party, like the main event in the evening, that'll be 18+. There'll still be no nudity, there'll still be no anything super graphic, but it will be adult themes, like adult language and adult themes. So, I wish that the people that are really fearful of what I'm producing would just get the cheapest ticket and turn out and check it out for 5 minutes, because it would absolutely squash any of the fears that they are projecting on anyone but themselves.
And I think that's an important thing to put out to people, that we just recently here had 2 burlesque shows, that's totally different than a drag show. People need to understand that there's no nudity and it's all good.
Right. Well, drag is political in its core, but especially these days, it's like a hot button issue that has to be pulled up and dragged through the mud for some reason. It's good entertainment. It's good quality entertainment, performance art, and the teen show will be extra squeaky clean. Like, there's nothing to fear unless you're scared of fun. If you're scared of fun, don't come.
Thanks, you guys. I want to thank Doug and Tammy and Joe for coming and doing this such last minute. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Thanks for asking the good questions and having the information for us. And thanks so much, Dom, for being really, really just super present, super here, super in it. And thanks all of you for being here too. We're going to post this online and share the link in the next couple days or 3. Come to the show. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.